It's a strange paradox of human connection, isn't it? We spend so much of our lives seeking love, yearning for that deep, resonant bond with another person. Yet, when we're faced with the possibility of losing it, the fear that grips us often feels far more potent than the joy of having found it in the first place. We're willing to bend, to appease, to shrink ourselves in an effort to prevent that dreaded disconnection, even when it might be the very thing that's slowly eroding the relationship's foundation. Why is the pain of potential loss so much more visceral, so much more paralyzing than the comfort of connection? The illusion we often operate under is that expressing our needs, our doubts, or our boundaries too strongly will somehow push the other person away. We believe that if we're too demanding, too visible with our insecurities, or too direct about our expectations, we risk shattering the delicate balance, making ourselves appear needy or unattractive. This fear is deeply ingrained, a relic of evolutionary pressures where social exclusion could mean literal death. In our modern world, it manifests as the pervasive anxiety that voicing a complaint, asking for reassurance, or even admitting we miss someone will signal a lack of independence, a flaw in our desirability. We see this play out in countless ways: the person who avoids confronting a recurring issue, the one who constantly checks their phone hoping for a sign, the other who agrees to plans they dread just to avoid a perceived conflict. We convince ourselves that maintaining the status quo, even a fragile one, is safer than risking a negative reaction by being fully honest. This narrative, that silence and compliance are the keys to sustained affection, becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. The hidden mechanism at play here is a subtle but powerful imbalance in attention and investment, directly influencing perceived value. When we are more afraid of losing someone than we are confident in our own worth or the strength of the connection, we unconsciously begin to overinvest. This overinvestment isn't just about time or effort. It's about emotional energy, about prioritizing the other person's perceived comfort and approval above our own. Think of it like a delicate scale. On one side, you have your own needs, desires, and boundaries. On the other, you have the perceived needs and desires of the other person, or more accurately, your assumption of what those are. If the fear of loss tips that scale heavily towards the other side, you'll find yourself constantly adjusting, making concessions, and trying to maintain equilibrium by diminishing your own side. The more we do this, the more the other person's presence, or even just the idea of their presence, becomes disproportionately valuable in our minds. We start to believe that our happiness is contingent on them, and therefore their potential departure becomes an existential threat. This isn't about conscious manipulation. It's a deeply ingrained psychological response to perceived scarcity, a fear that if this one source of connection disappears, we won't be able to find another. Let's break down this cycle. Consider the behavior someone consistently cancels plans at the last minute. The hidden signal they might be sending is not necessarily a lack of interest, but perhaps a struggle with commitment, anxiety, or simply poor time management. However, the psychological effect on the person being canceled on is often one of feeling devalued, of their time and presence not being important enough. The consequence, they might start to feel resentful, insecure, and begin questioning their own desirability. The alternative, however, would be to address the behavior directly, perhaps by saying, "Hey, I understand things come up, but when plans are canceled frequently, it makes me feel a bit uncertain about our connection. Can we talk about what's going on?" Instead, the fear of confrontation or of appearing needy leads to silent accommodation, which amplifies the negative feelings. Another example, someone who rarely initiates contact. Their behavior might stem from a belief that they shouldn't appear too eager, or perhaps they're simply not a naturally communicative person. The hidden signal here could be a desire for the other person to take the lead, to pursue them, thereby confirming their desirability. But the psychological effect on the person waiting for contact is often anxiety, doubt, and a feeling of being unwanted. The consequence is that they might pull back, creating a self-imposed distance that mirrors the perceived indifference. The alternative, a calm expression of desire: "I really enjoy our conversations. I'd love it if you initiated contact sometimes too. It makes me feel really connected." This pattern of behavior driven by the fear of loss creates a distinct identity shift. We move from an identity rooted in self-assuredness and balanced connection to one that is primarily focused on seeking external validation. Our sense of self-worth becomes tethered to the other person's continued interest. We start to define our value by whether or not we are chosen, rather than by our inherent qualities and self-acceptance. The goal shifts from building a relationship on mutual respect and genuine connection to managing the other person's perception of us, aiming to be indispensable. This is a precarious position, as it leaves us vulnerable to every perceived slight, every moment of silence, every subtle shift in their demeanor. We become hypervigilant, constantly scanning for signs of disinterest, and often misinterpreting neutral cues as negative ones. So, what's the realistic action we can take within the next 24 to 48 hours to begin shifting this dynamic? It's not about grand gestures or dramatic pronouncements. It's about a small, deliberate act of reclaiming your own space and internal validation. Choose one interaction, one conversation, one moment in the next couple of days where you would typically suppress a need, a boundary, or an honest feeling for fear of rocking the boat. Instead, voice it, not in an accusatory way, but in a clear, concise, and grounded manner. It could be as simple as saying, I'm actually feeling a bit tired tonight. So I'm going to head home early when you would normally stay out of obligation, or perhaps I need some quiet time to myself right now, instead of automatically engaging. Another example, I'm not sure I can commit to that right now. I need to think about it, instead of an immediate, anxious yes. The key is to communicate a genuine internal state or need without seeking approval or fearing rejection. Observe your own feelings during and after this small act. Notice if the world continues to spin. Notice if the sky falls. The goal isn't to provoke a specific reaction from the other person, but to begin recalibrating your own internal compass, to practice trusting your own needs and voice, and to gradually shift your identity from one of seeking validation to one of understanding and honoring your own position. This is the first step in understanding that the true security in any relationship doesn't come from preventing loss, but from cultivating a sense of self-worth that is independent of it.